Welcome to our channel. We're so glad you're here. In today's video, we dive into a thrilling story that you won't want to miss. As we journey through twists and turns, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and let's start a conversation. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can be the first to catch the next exciting chapter we'll be sharing tomorrow. Trust us, you won't want to miss it. Let's get started and jump right into today's adventure, the ultimate test of trust. How a K-9 officer saved lives and rebuilt his partnership. Ethan Brooks had always prided himself on his discipline, his commitment to the law, and his unwavering dedication to protecting the innocent. At 34, he was no stranger to the dangers of the job. He had spent years navigating the gritty world of law enforcement, keeping the streets safe. For Ethan, everything in the world was black and white. Right was right, and wrong was wrong. There was no room for gray areas, no room for compromise. This clear-cut vision of the world was reflected in his bond with his K-9 partner, Titan. Titan wasn't just any dog. He was a 7-year-old German shepherd, sharp as a tack with instincts that were second to none. Ethan trusted Titan more than anything. Together, they made an unbeatable team, navigating through the most dangerous situations with flawless coordination. They had been through it all: drug busts, high-speed chases, and dangerous criminals. And every time Titan had been by Ethan's side, just as loyal and reliable as ever. The bond they shared was unbreakable, and people in the department often marveled at how they seemed to read each other's minds without saying a word. Over the years, they had become more than just a team. They were family. They had cracked more cases together than Ethan could count, and the respect between them was mutual, natural, and unquestioned. Their partnership was the gold standard in the department. Everyone could see it. No one doubted their ability to work together, and no one could deny the unspoken trust that passed between them in the heat of any operation. But that perfect partnership, that unshakable bond, was about to face its biggest test yet. It all started with a drug bust. The operation was supposed to be routine. Ethan had been assigned to lead the bust in one of the city's roughest neighborhoods. The plan was simple. Approach the building, take control, arrest the criminals inside. Nothing too complicated. Titan would be by his side, as always. But as Ethan and Titan made their way into the dark alley behind the building, something felt off. The streets were quieter than usual. The tension in the air was palpable. Ethan instinctively checked his gun, his eyes scanning the shadows. His instincts were screaming at him that something wasn't right. Titan, however, was already ahead, his nose twitching as it picked up a scent. Without a moment's hesitation, the dog moved quickly, slipping into the darkness of the alley, as though on a mission of his own. Ethan called out for Titan to wait, but the dog was already gone, moving deeper into the shadows. "Titan, come back here!" Ethan barked, his voice firm. But Titan didn't stop. The dog was on a mission and nothing could slow him down. Ethan's heart began to race. He knew Titan was good, but this wasn't like the usual searches they had done together. This felt different. This wasn't just a simple search. Something was off. Titan was moving too fast, too determined. Ethan, his hand gripped tightly around his flashlight, followed his partner, his muscles tensed and ready for anything. It wasn't until Ethan rounded the corner that he saw it. A man hidden behind a stack of crates preparing to make his move. Before Ethan could react, a shot rang out, the sound of the bullet cutting through the air, barely missing him. He dove for cover, his heart pounding as he scrambled to safety. Titan, however, didn't hesitate. The dog lunged at the man, knocking the weapon from his hands and forcing him to the ground. The chaos that followed was fast and intense. The gunman took off running, and Titan was right behind him, his loyalty to Ethan unwavering, his training kicking in. "Titan, stop!" Ethan shouted, but the dog was too far ahead. The chase took them deeper into the maze of alleyways, and soon, Ethan found himself alone with Titan in a part of the city he wasn't familiar with. By the time they cornered the suspect, the gunman had managed to escape. The team arrived too late, and the operation was compromised. Ethan stood there, breathing heavily, looking down at Titan. The dog was panting, his eyes tired but still alert. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of failure. He had failed his team. He had failed himself. For the first time in their perfect partnership, Titan had ignored his command. "What the hell were you thinking?" Ethan snapped, grabbing Titan by the collar and shaking the dog in frustration. "I told you to wait. I told you to stop. You disobeyed me." Titan looked up at him, confusion and uncertainty in his eyes. His body was tense from the chase, but Ethan didn't see that. All he could see was a mistake, an error in judgment. That had cost them the operation. The ride back to the station was silent. Ethan's mind was consumed by his anger and frustration. He couldn't understand why Titan had gone off on his own. Was the dog getting too old? Was his focus slipping? The questions swirled in his mind, but no answers came. The bond that had once felt unbreakable was now strained, and Ethan didn't know how to fix it. As the days passed, the bond between Ethan and Titan, once unbreakable, began to deteriorate. Ethan had never doubted Titan's loyalty, but after that fateful drug bust, something changed. His frustration and anger simmered beneath the surface, creeping into every interaction with his partner. Titan had always been the perfect K9, sharp, focused, and obedient. But that one moment, when Titan disobeyed his command and went rogue, haunted Ethan. The feeling of failure gnawed at him. The following days were filled with silence. Ethan snapped at Titan for small mistakes, pushing the dog harder than ever. Titan, ever loyal, responded with submission. His ears would flatten and his tail would droop. He was doing everything he could to please Ethan, but the connection between them was weakening, and Titan knew it. The once seamless communication had turned into an uncomfortable quiet. Ethan could see it in Titan's eyes, the hesitation, the uncertainty. It was a look he had never seen before in his partner. Titan was no longer the same sharp, confident dog he had once been, and Ethan couldn't figure out why. One evening, Ethan's frustration boiled over during a routine case. A missing person, a young woman, had gone missing, and her last known location was a park on the outskirts of the city. Ethan and Titan were called to the scene, but the air around them felt thick with tension. The park was eerily quiet, almost unnervingly so, and as they walked deeper into the shadows of the trees, Ethan's impatience started to flare. They needed to find the woman, and they needed to do it fast. But Titan was moving slowly, his nose twitching as he sniffed the ground, his body tense but not moving with the urgency Ethan expected. "Titan, focus," Ethan barked, his voice rising with frustration. "We don't have time for this." Titan looked up at him, his eyes filled with confusion. The dog had always been alert, sharp, and focused, but now there was hesitation in his movements. He paused, sniffing the air again before continuing ahead, but his steps were slower, heavier. Ethan's anger flared once again. The dog wasn't moving fast enough. He wasn't reacting as he should. Titan's usual energy was gone, replaced with an almost lethargic pace. Ethan's patience had run thin, and without thinking, he snapped at Titan, pulling hard on the leash. "Come on, you can do better than this. What's wrong with you?" Titan stumbled slightly, his body reacting to the sharp tug, but he didn't resist. He had learned long ago to obey Ethan, even when the command was harsh. The once seamless connection between them had now become strained, but Titan, loyal as ever, kept following Ethan's lead, even when the commands hurt. As they continued through the park, Ethan's mind was clouded. He was too focused on the pressure of the case, on the need to find the missing woman, to see what was happening with Titan. His frustration had built up over the past few days, and it was starting to spill over. Titan wasn't responding the way he used to. He wasn't the same dog, and for the first time, Ethan wasn't sure if it was because of age or if it was because of the tension between them. Then, as they reached a secluded clearing in the park, something shifted. Titan stopped in his tracks, his body rigid with focus. Ethan, still seething with frustration, looked at his partner, ready to shout at him again. But this time, something made him stop. Titan was standing still, sniffing the air with a concentration that was hard to miss. His ears were perked and his body was tense, but he wasn't moving forward. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He could see it now. Titan had picked up something vital. The dog wasn't broken. He wasn't losing his edge. He had just been waiting for Ethan to recognize it. Titan. Good job, Ethan muttered, his voice softer now, realizing the dog had picked up the trail. But when he looked back at Titan, the hesitation in the dog's eyes was still there, and that's when it hit him. It wasn't just Titan who had changed. Ethan had changed too. He had been too hard on Titan, too focused on perfection, on results. In his desperation to be the perfect handler, he had forgotten that Titan wasn't just a tool. He was a living, breathing partner, and he needed Ethan's trust, just as much as Ethan needed his. With a deep sigh, Ethan walked over to Titan, his anger dissipating for the first time in days. He patted the dog's head, his fingers running through Titan's fur. "I'm sorry, buddy," Ethan whispered, the words feeling foreign but real. "I've been too hard on you. I forgot what we had." Titan looked up at him, his tail wagging, ever so slightly, as if to say that everything would be okay. Ethan could feel the tension in Titan's body begin to fade, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he knew their bond was still there. It just needed time to heal. As they followed the trail through the park, Ethan knew that their journey wasn't over. The missing woman was found, alive but unconscious, and Titan had done his job. But this case wasn't just about finding a missing person. It was about rebuilding trust. It was about restoring the partnership they had once taken for granted. And as they walked back to the car together, side by side, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Their bond wasn't broken. It was just waiting to be rebuilt. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, and this time they would do it stronger than ever. The days that followed were strained. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Titan, his loyal K9 partner, wasn't the same. The sharp focus, the unwavering loyalty, those things he once took for granted, seemed distant now. Every day, Titan's hesitation grew more noticeable. Ethan had spent years building a partnership with the dog, a partnership built on trust and understanding. But now, that trust felt like it was slipping away, and Ethan was too stubborn to admit it. Ethan tried to ignore the growing tension. He pushed Titan harder, demanding more of the dog, convinced that if he just stayed focused on the job, things would return to normal. But the harder he pushed, the further Titan seemed to retreat. The once perfect bond between them had now turned into something uncomfortable, a silence that neither of them knew how to break. It all came to a head one evening when they were called out to a missing persons case. A young woman had disappeared, and her last known location was a park on the outskirts of the city. The case was urgent, and the pressure weighed heavily on Ethan's shoulders. The team had already been searching for hours with no leads, and now it was up to him and Titan to find her. They arrived at the park, and immediately something felt off. The air was thick with tension, the trees casting long shadows in the failing light. Ethan's instinct screamed that something wasn't right, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Titan, usually so sharp and eager, was moving slower than usual. His steps were hesitant, his nose twitching but not with the usual urgency. Ethan called out to him, but the dog barely responded. His movements were slow, unsure. "Titan, focus." Ethan snapped, the frustration seeping into his voice. "We don't have time for this. Get moving." Titan looked up at him, his eyes confused, but he obeyed. He trotted ahead, but his steps were heavy as though the weight of the situation was dragging him down. Ethan's temper flared. "Come on, Titan. You've done this 100 times. What's wrong with you?" He pulled the leash harder than usual, yanking the dog forward. Titan stumbled slightly, his body reacting to the sharp tug, but instead of resisting, he simply followed. Ethan didn't notice how the dog's ears drooped, how his tail hung lower than usual. All he could see was a dog not living up to his expectations, a dog who wasn't acting like the Titan he knew. The frustration that had been building up for days finally boiled over. As they moved deeper into the park, Ethan's impatience clouded his judgment. Titan was still sniffing the ground, but his body language was all wrong. He was hesitating, as if he wasn't sure where to go or what to do. Ethan clenched his jaw, pushing through the frustration. "Come on, Titan," he muttered. "You're better than this." But Titan wasn't responding with the sharpness he was known for. It was as if the bond between them had weakened, and the dog no longer understood what Ethan needed from him. Titan paused again, sniffing the air, his eyes darting to the side, but there was no urgency in his actions. Ethan's heart raced with anxiety. They needed to find the woman. Fast. He couldn't afford to let his partner's hesitation slow them down. It wasn't until they reached a secluded clearing that the tension in the air changed. Titan stopped dead in his tracks. His body was still, his ears alert. He sniffed the air once more and then slowly turned his head, focusing on a faint trail leading into the woods. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan saw Titan's sharp instincts returning. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The dog had found it, the trail. Titan had done his job. It wasn't about the speed. It wasn't about rushing through the park. It was about patience, about trusting Titan's instincts. For a brief moment, Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He had been pushing Titan too hard, expecting him to be perfect every time. But Titan wasn't a machine. He was a living, breathing partner. "Good job, buddy," Ethan said, his voice softer now, the anger melting away. Titan's tail wagged slightly, his body relaxing as he picked up the trail with renewed focus. Ethan followed, his mind shifting from frustration to understanding. Titan wasn't broken. He had been waiting for Ethan to see the bigger picture. The bond between them hadn't vanished. It just needed time to heal. As they followed the trail, Ethan's thoughts drifted to the days before. He had been too focused on the pressure of the job, too consumed by his need for control, and in doing so, he had neglected the one thing that had always made their partnership great: trust. Titan had never failed him before. It was Ethan who had failed to see that the dog needed him just as much as he needed the dog. When they found the woman, unconscious but alive, Ethan felt a rush of relief. Titan had done his job just as he always had, but this time Ethan understood something. More important, Titan wasn't just a tool to get the job done. He was Ethan's partner, and that partnership needed to be built on trust, respect, and understanding, not control. As they walked back to the car, side by side, Ethan knew they had come through something together. Their bond wasn't broken. It was just in need of repair, and with time, patience, and understanding, they would rebuild it, one step at a time. As the days turned into weeks, the strain between Ethan and Titan only grew. The bond they had once shared was now fractured. Fragile? Ethan tried to push past it, to pretend that everything would return to normal. But he knew it wasn't that simple. The guilt gnawed at him. He had failed his partner, and the signs were clear. Titan, usually so eager, now hesitated. His movements were slower, his focus not as sharp as it used to be. Every small mistake seemed to chip away at their connection, and Ethan could feel it in his bones. Then came another call. A young woman had gone missing, last seen near a park on the outskirts of town. The case felt different, heavier. The pressure weighed on Ethan's shoulders as he and Titan were dispatched to search the area. They arrived at the park just as the evening. Light began to fade, casting long shadows across the quiet paths. It was too quiet, unnervingly so, and the stillness set Ethan on edge. Titan, who had been leading the way, slowed down as they entered the park. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air. But instead of charging forward with the usual urgency, Titan paused, looking around as though unsure of his next step. Ethan's impatience flared. "Titan, focus!" Ethan snapped, frustration creeping into his voice. "We don't have time for this. We need to find her." Titan looked up at him, his eyes filled with confusion and hesitation. Ethan's heart sank. This wasn't just the dog's usual behavior. Something had shifted. Titan wasn't responding like he had before. He wasn't the sharp, confident K9 that Ethan had always relied on. It was as though the dog was losing. Something Ethan couldn't put his finger on. The anger that had been building for weeks erupted, and Ethan pulled on the leash too hard. "Come on, Titan. You've done this 100 times. What's wrong with you?" He yanked the dog forward, but Titan stumbled slightly, his steps slowing, his tail low. It was clear to Ethan now that Titan was struggling, but he was too consumed by his own frustration to see the toll it was taking on his partner. Titan didn't resist. He had learned to obey, even when the commands were harsh. But the hesitation in his movements, the way his body seemed to shrink under the pressure, was a stark reminder of how far their bond had deteriorated. Ethan had been too hard on Titan, expecting him to be perfect, pushing him too hard, too fast. As they continued through the park, Ethan's thoughts clouded with frustration. He was too focused on the urgency of the case, the need to find the missing woman, to notice what was happening with Titan. He was pushing the dog beyond his limits, not realizing that the strain wasn't just on the case, it was on Titan too. It wasn't until they reached a small, secluded clearing that something changed. Titan stopped suddenly, his body still, his ears perked as he sniffed the air. Ethan, still clouded by impatience, almost barked at him again, but something held him back. He watched as Titan's body tensed, and the dog, after a long pause, started moving forward. His steps were deliberate, focused. Titan had found something. Ethan's heart raced. He realized with a jolt that Titan had picked up the trail. The dog had been hesitating, not out of disobedience, but because Ethan had failed to give him the space he needed. The connection was still there, still strong. It had never really left. It just needed understanding, patience, and time to heal. "Good job, Titan," Ethan murmured, his voice softer now, filled with a mix of relief and guilt. Titan's tail wagged slightly, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan saw that spark of confidence return to the dog's eyes. They were back on track. Titan was still the same dog, and Ethan had finally recognized what had been missing: trust. He had failed to trust Titan, to give him the space to do what he was trained to do. As they followed the trail through the park, Ethan's frustration melted away, replaced by a quiet understanding. Titan had never stopped being the partner he always was. It was Ethan who had lost his way, who had let his doubts cloud his judgment. But now, with the trail leading them to the missing woman, alive but unconscious, Ethan realized something important. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about control. It was about trust, respect, and mutual understanding. When they made their way back to the car, Ethan walked beside Titan, his hand gently resting on the dog's back. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. The bond between them wasn't lost. It was just waiting to be rebuilt. And together, they would get there. After the successful recovery of the missing woman, a strange calm settled over Ethan and Titan. It wasn't the victory he had expected. Sure, the woman was safe, but Ethan knew there was more work to be done. More than just solving cases. He had failed Titan, and the bond they once shared, the trust, needed to be rebuilt. But where did they start? How could they undo the damage he had caused? For the first time in a long time, Ethan wasn't sure. The missing person case had served as a reminder that Titan wasn't just a tool to get the job done. He was a partner, a living, breathing being with emotions, instincts, and a loyalty that ran deeper than Ethan had ever realized. The hard truth was, he had taken that partnership for granted. Ethan spent the next few days reflecting on everything that had happened. The mistakes, the harsh words, the way he had pushed Titan too far. His mind kept returning to the conversations he had with his mother. She had reminded him that it wasn't just about being perfect. It was about being there for Titan when he needed him most. Titan had been by his side through thick and thin, always ready to fight, always ready to follow orders. But what had Ethan done for him in return? He had pushed Titan past his limits without understanding the strain it had caused. One afternoon, as the cold winds blew through the streets, Ethan received another call. This time it wasn't a missing person. It wasn't a drug bust or a criminal on the run. It was a hostage situation. A dangerous fugitive, known for violent crimes, had taken multiple hostages inside a local convenience store. Time was running out, and the clock was ticking. Ethan's gut tightened as he readied himself for the task at hand. This would be different. The stakes were higher. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan wasn't filled with anxiety. He had Ace by his side again, and for once that was enough. As they arrived at the scene, the air felt thick with tension. Officers had already surrounded the building and SWAT teams were in position. Ethan could see the stress on the officers' faces, the uncertainty. They had no idea what the gunman was capable of, or what he was planning. But Ethan knew one thing: he wasn't facing this alone. Titan was with him, and together they would get through this. "Stay sharp, Ace," Ethan whispered, looking down at his partner, who was sitting beside him in the car, alert and ready. His tail gave a slight wag, but his eyes were focused. Titan had always known what was at stake, and today was no different. It wasn't just about the mission. It was about making sure they both made it out safely. Ethan and Titan, along with the rest of the team, moved into position. The SWAT leader turned to Ethan and gave him a quick nod. "We need to move fast, Carson. The hostages are in the back room." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Let's do it," he said, his voice calm but determined. The team moved into position, and Ethan signaled to Titan. The dog's nose twitched as it picked up the scent, his body low and ready to act. They approached the building, but the situation was tense. Ethan could feel the gravity of it in his bones. This wasn't just another case. This was a test, one that would prove whether their bond had been fully restored. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. The air was thick with danger, and Ethan's senses were on high alert. He could hear the faint sounds of movement from inside the building, but the gunman was still too far ahead. Titan led the way, sniffing the ground, his steps calculated and deliberate. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt that familiar sense of trust in his partner. Titan was back. They were back. But then the sound of a door slamming echoed through the building, followed by a loud bang. Ethan's stomach dropped. Gunfire. It was too close. Without thinking, Titan bolted forward, his body moving with incredible speed and precision. Ethan shouted, "Stay with me, Ace!" But Titan was already ahead, focused on one thing: neutralizing the threat. Ethan pushed forward, his heart racing as he tried to keep up with Titan. He knew what the dog was capable of. He trusted him more than anyone. The dog had acted on instinct, and Ethan was determined to follow. They entered the back room, and there in the shadows was the gunman holding a hostage at gunpoint. Titan didn't hesitate. With a single lunge, the dog knocked the weapon out of the man's hand, sending him crashing to the ground. The hostage screamed, but Titan was already on top of the man, his powerful body holding him down with the precision of years of training. Ethan moved quickly, his gun drawn, as he rushed to secure the hostage. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle despite the chaos around them. The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face, but she was safe. She was alive. As the SWAT team rushed in to assist, Ethan looked down at Titan, who was still standing over the gunman, his eyes unwavering. The dog had done it. He had acted without hesitation. He had saved the hostages. Ethan walked over to Titan, his heart swelling with pride. "You did it, buddy," he whispered, scratching the dog behind the ears. Titan's tail wagged gently, his body relaxing now that the danger had passed. They had done it. They had passed the ultimate test. They made their way back to the car. Ethan knew that their partnership had been solidified once again. They had faced the test together, and they had come out stronger for it. The road to redemption wasn't over, but today they had taken a huge step forward. Ethan had learned that trust wasn't just given. It had to be earned, and it had to be maintained. And as long as Titan was by his side, he knew they could handle anything that came their way. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of Ethan and Titan's journey so far? the way their bond was tested, and how Ethan struggled to rebuild their trust. Do you think he pushed Titan too hard, or was Titan just having a rough patch? Do you think their partnership is stronger now after the hostage situation, or will they continue to face challenges in the future? Let us know where you're watching from, and feel free to share your predictions for what's coming next in the story. Do you think they will face more tests in their partnership, or will they finally find a balance between trust and teamwork? Your feedback is incredibly important to us, and we love reading all your insights. Whether you agree or disagree with Ethan's decisions, we want to hear your perspective. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next thrilling chapter in Ethan and Titan's story. The best is yet to come, and we're excited to take you along for the ride. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. Your thoughts are what make this journey even more exciting.